Hi, I'm Elizabeth Peggs with Geosynthetica.net, and I'm here today with Bill and Nick, and we're going to talk a little bit about GeoTerra GTO, a new product being offered by Presto, and some of the unique solutions that it can provide to some interesting construction challenges. Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I'm a project manager for the Bolt Company, a national construction company centered in Appleton, Wisconsin. I work in commercial, but we have business sectors in commercial, healthcare, higher education, wind, and industrial. I'm also president of the Wisconsin Green Building Alliance, Wisconsin's chapter to the United States Green Building Council.
Let's talk a little bit now about GeoTerra and what the product does and what kind of projects use it.
GeoTerra GTO is a new version of GeoTerra that was developed about 7 years ago for a South American market for oil companies, national oil companies. And the need at that time was seen to have something that was lightweight yet strong to perform as construction mats, but lightweight enough to bring in on helicopters. We looked for something that filled the unmet need that contractors have for something that's fast, light, yet strong enough to do the job.
Okay, let's talk about light. What is the difference from a more traditional polymat to this? Do you have a percentage number about how much lighter this might be? What kind of
the
weight
GeoTerra and GeoTerra GTO flavors of mat are 10% of the weight of a typical polymat.
So you're saving 90% of the weight.
Oh,
you're eliminating 90% of the weight.
Probably 80% of the material as well.
Now, Nick, you are a project manager at Bolt.
Yep.
You are also the president of the Wisconsin Green Building Association. Thank you very much for your service. Can you tell us a little bit about the church project that you did using the GeoTerra GTO, why you selected it, and what the positive and if there were any negative impacts to the project, what they were?
Sure, yeah, the project was in addition to an existing facility, and it was landlocked on all three sides that were with building or a roadway or some vegetation that they had there. So there was only one access point, and that access point actually went through about 18 to 24 inches of organic topsoil. It was also soft, very
mushy,
soft.
Not conducive.
Right, the main watershed area as well, and there was a wetland on the right. So what we wanted to do is really try and be as unobtrusive as possible and get back to the construction site. So we're looking for a product that we could put right over the existing topsoil and not have to over-excavate it and then later on just pack in gravel or timbers or something. And that made the GeoTerra GTO ideal for it.
Excellent.
We were able to put it down in just a couple of days and with our typical labor force, and it was an instant roadway.
Okay, so you said typical labor force. How does that compare with what you would have done otherwise if you'd used timbers or aggregate or something like that to solve the problem?
Well, we would have been using much heavier machinery. In the case of larger mats, we would have had to use a crane.
Okay.
And there's also increased labor of just more bodies on the ground having to complete that work.
A little bit of safety comes into play there.
Well, yeah, I mean, anytime you're using that type of equipment, you're having to be more careful about that in access zones and swing areas, and we just didn't have to do that.
Excellent. Did you have an opportunity to do any kind of evaluation on or a cost comparison? Do you have a concept of what that might have saved you not only in time but in actual dollars and cents compared to a more traditional?
We didn't do a direct cost analysis of it, but I mean, if you look at just the labor dollars, it took us about a day and a half to put it in. If we were to be, spending money on an excavator, putting in gravel, over excavating, and then really the cost to put that material back and restore the site, I mean, you're looking at days and then also additional costs from an excavator.
How do you feel about it from a green building standpoint?
Well, there's just less equipment on site. I mean, you're less of a negative impact on carbon emissions. You don't have the amount of equipment that you had, like I was saying. But the better part for the owner and for the site is that we as unobtrusive as possible. We're not over excavating. We're not stockpiling topsoils. We're not putting gravel in. Oftentimes you pack that down and you're adding more gravel and you're layering it up. And then later on you're removing all that material and restoring the site. We didn't have to do that. The mat goes down. We're able to run over it, and it stayed perfectly in place like that.
That was going to be my next question. You did it. How did it work?
It worked real well. It worked real well. I know this is a bit of a pilot project for Presto, and there's probably a little bit of opportunity for improvement in some anchors that they did add.
Okay.
And we were running over the exact same spot over and over and over again, and the product was in place for the life of the project. And actually, there is a fire lane and necessary fire access to the rear part of the building. So we're leaving about 3/4 of it in place.
Oh,
yeah, we'll be
neat.
topsoiling over the top of it and seeding it. So in the event that there's ever a necessity for fire equipment to get back there, they can just drive right over it.
Where else is this being used? You talked at the beginning of the interview about some mining and Latin America, and so what other groups of people should be paying attention to this where they have an opportunity to take advantage of this technology?
Well, anybody in the Marcellus Shale play, oil sands. We've been down in South America, in Ecuador, in Brazil, with some major oil companies doing a 17-kilometer roadway made from this material.
Wow.
Through one of the...
It's not a small project.
Yeah, it's probably arguably the most diverse ecosystem in the world that we had to put a road through that will be able to be removed, and all traces of the road removed after the pipeline is laid, using the roadway to access the drilling site and the pipeline lay next to it.
So Bill, we've heard a couple times about how easy this is to deploy. Can you give us some specifics? What happens to the site when you're going to deploy this product? What other things are taken into consideration? How does it work?
If the site is already relatively level, nothing need be done but to lay the high-strength geotextile underneath the GeoTerra or the GeoTerra GTO. If it's a very rough site, you might want to do some preliminary grading.
Okay.
Because although the material is semi-flexible and semi-rigid and it will conform to the site, you are, after all, trying to build a roadway or trying to build a platform, and in either way, you'd like to have it be a little less undulacious.
What kind of vehicles? Can we just drive our cars? Can we get into these? Clearly, we've got something here that's heavy equipment. Mining, you mentioned, and we're talking big stuff. What's the situation there? How much can that take?
It can take any vehicle to an extent. Large vehicles, low-pressure vehicles, are actually easier because they may have tire pressures of 20 or 30 psi, and although the heavy load is there, the load is spread over a larger area. Probably the most challenging type of vehicle are the types of vehicle that were on the pilot project that we're speaking about, because there you had 100, 110 psi, 40-ton loads of concrete trucks coming in. Those are challenging, heavy stuff on a CBR of 2. And you know, we did see movement of the pad in that case. There was 3 to 4 inches of movement and rutting, and that's because the material underneath was actually shoving side to side.
Sure.
And as they rode down different pathways, it would move the material back and forth.
What did the people who were driving, if anything, did they say anything about their experience with this? Did you get any feedback from them?
They were terrified. We had to really talk the driver into telling him it's okay, we'll pay to have the truck, you know, removed if it doesn't make it, because after seeing it, the concrete driver just was not interested in coming in. When they came out, the reaction was a lot of fun to enjoy because they were convinced.
Good.
We'll offer free design evaluation and let you know whether or not it will work on your particular site based upon CBR, the loading, the trip count, torsional loading, all those factors come into play. There may be times when we say, use a timber mat. It's a better choice in this case. We just can't do it.
So you just mentioned all of these design factors that you're examining. What about lab testing? Are you doing some lab testing? What about the compression? What about the strength of the resin and the performance of this from that standpoint?
It's been lab tested for compression strength, which is the least of our worries, because at over 400 psi, nothing comes anywhere near that.
Right.
Torsional loading, we've tested it under live empirical conditions, and we've got the product built up to a point. In particular, GTO is even stronger because that is a double wall system.
We ran multiple large-scale cyclic plate loading tests on GeoTerra over weak and intermediate subgrades. The test results will help Bristol to design a system that matches customers' needs.
You mentioned GTO and regular GeoTerra. Do you want to elaborate just for a quick second on the differences in the two materials? Why do we need GTO if we've got GeoTerra already?
GeoTerra is made from recycled materials because it's part of the play of the product, is it's green in so many ways. Mm-hmm. But GTO, in order to have the faster connection system, and it is faster to put down than GeoTerra, mm-hmm. In order to have that, we had to make it out of only virgin HDPE because the coefficient of expansion, of thermal expansion of the material has to be identical so that all the holes line up properly, whereas GeoTerra, there was some play there. We also strengthened and added material to the GTO so that it could be used with less expensive underlayments, that it spread the load better, a kind of a better snowshoe, and then a double wall system around the, we call it a picture frame, around the outside of each of the units that are about 4.33 square feet. And that gives it a framework of strength and toughness for torsional loading.
So Nick, you were working on a church project, and it was, as I understand it, a fully functional, already built church. You were doing an addition. And how did the GTO affect your ability to keep that site up and running as a functional church?
That's a good question. As much as in the construction industry you look at the end product as being what we deliver, really it's much more about the service. That was a working facility day in and day out, and it just wasn't on Sundays that people arrive. It was on a consistent basis. You deal with people that are coming onto the site that are interested in construction, want to see it, but they really just need to get into the building in a safe way. With this system, we weren't bringing on heavy timbers, we weren't bringing on all that extra equipment. It was literally a few guys and tools that Presto provided with us that helped it go in about a day and a half. It was awesome. So we didn't intrude on what they were doing, which is about the best compliment. They can just see it happen and go about their daily lives. But also from a sustainability standpoint, it was excellent that we didn't have to disturb nearly as much as what we would have had to. Not only from a position of having giant soil stockpiles, but the erosion control measures that we would have to put in place if we were disturbing soils.
Sure.
With not using this product, we just didn't have to do. So when an owner looks at that and a contractor looks at that, you're being unobtrusive, which helps us to deliver a better service, but we're also being sensitive to their pocketbook, and we're not spending additional dollars on erosion control, we're not spending additional dollars on equipment, or just literally the boots on the ground.
Now that you've used it once in a pilot project, do you see this as something that you're going to use again in the future if the opportunity presents itself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that the opportunity doesn't present itself. We'd like to not avoid engineered solutions and spanning troublesome soils. But absolutely, definitely, if there was an opportunity that presented itself or I needed to do a similar action, no question, it's definitely a viable alternative.
And you mentioned something to me before we were talking about coming up with some color-coded boats to help people know where to drive on these things. And talk to me about it.
This is the typical bolt. It's polyester for strength because there's quite a bit of force put on this, and the nut that the bolt goes with is cast in place into the part when it's injection molded. We make these in yellow as well, and we make them for delineators for center lines and for edge marking. When you're on a long sea of access road and you're looking down it and you've got yellow tops, it looks like lines on a roadway. The reason we do that is for center line to keep the traffic on the correct side on the busier roads such as in Ecuador. But on the edge marking, we don't want the traffic to get too close to the edge because after all, we're spreading that heavy load of that tire footprint on a 3-foot area. So we have about 1.5 feet from the edge of the road that we want the drivers to stay away. And if we give them the instructions that follow the yellow line, it works out real well.
Are you going to continue to help this product come up with great, useful ideas for your clients?
That's an excellent question because when we first put the products on the market, one of the things we got feedback on are the constructability. And so we created automated tools, power tools, tools with longer necks on them so that the workers didn't have to bend over. We find if we listen to the contractor and give the contractor what they need, we do very well in the marketplace.
Sure, and they do well because they're happy to use the products and they work for them. So that indicates to me that you're working with an innovative company that's been around for a long time, a good history and good sight into the future, foresight. I think that's probably about it. Is there anything else that you wanted to add today about the products?
Just that we'd be interested in working with anybody to offer free design guidance as to whether a site is a good candidate for the use of the product, and if not, we'll connect them with a mat provider that can give them an alternative.
So I'm just going to recap really quickly. We talked about it being 10% of the weight of more traditional materials. We talked about improved deployment, not only because it's quick and efficient to put in physically, but because there's less site work that typically needs to be done, excavation, less equipment. So economically very feasible, environmentally very feasible, positive results from Wisconsin to Latin America, from churches to mining. Great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.